There are moments in life when doing the right thing feels like signing your own death warrant. Moments when compassion and self-preservation stand on opposite sides of a choice, and you have only seconds to decide which one wins. Isaiah Bennett faced that choice on a rain-soaked highway 3 weeks before the most important day of his life. He didn't know that the woman trembling in the storm would become the person who held his entire future in her hands. He didn't know that one act of humanity would become the only evidence of his character that truly mattered. This is the story of a single black father who saved a stranger's life, only to discover that she might be the only one who could save his. Isaiah woke every morning at 5:42, not by choice, but because survival demanded it. His apartment sat on the eastern edge of town, in one of those neighborhoods where people worked multiple jobs and still couldn't climb out of the cycle. The American dream felt distant here, like a promise made by people who had never had to fight for it. But it was home. And in the small bedroom at the end of a narrow hallway, behind a door decorated with crayon drawings and spelling tests marked with gold stars, slept the only thing in this world that mattered to him. Kennedy, his 7-year-old daughter. His reason for waking up, his reason for everything. Isaiah had become an expert in silence. He moved through the apartment like a ghost each morning, careful not to wake her. Breakfast was always the same: eggs, toast, orange juice poured into a plastic cup with a faded princess printed on the side. The same cup Kennedy had used since she was 3 years old. The same cup her mother had bought before she left. People always asked the same question when they learned Isaiah was raising Kennedy alone. Where's her mother? The question carried an unspoken judgment, as though a black man raising his daughter by himself was somehow incomplete. Suspicious. Not enough. The truth was simple, even if it hurt. Janelle left when Kennedy was 2. She said she wasn't ready. She said she needed to find herself. She said a lot of things that all meant the same thing. She chose to go, and Isaiah chose to stay. 5 years had passed since then, and Isaiah was still choosing. Every single morning. Choosing to show up, choosing to sacrifice, choosing to be the father Kennedy deserved, even when the world whispered that he wasn't. By 7:15, Kennedy was awake. Hair braided carefully, the way Isaiah had taught himself through YouTube videos and patient practice. Lunch packed, backpack ready. She asked him that morning, as she did most mornings, if they could get ice cream after school. Her eyes were bright with hope. Isaiah smiled, the kind of smile that concealed a bank account with $47 until Friday. He told her they would see. That's what he always said. We'll see, baby girl. He dropped her off at school at 7:50, watched her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing against her small frame, and waited until she disappeared inside before driving away. This was their routine. This was their life. Isaiah worked as a maintenance supervisor at Riverside Manufacturing, a sprawling facility on the industrial side of town. 12-hour shifts, decent pay, benefits, the kind of job that kept you alive but never let you truly live. He was good at it, reliable, the person everyone called when something broke. But lately, something else was breaking, something that 12-hour shifts and steady paychecks couldn't fix. Janelle was back. After 5 years of silence, 5 years of missed birthdays and broken promises, 5 years of Isaiah being both mother and father, she had returned, and she wanted custody of Kennedy. Before this story continues, let me pause for just a moment. If something in Isaiah's struggle is already resonating with you, if you've ever had to fight for what's yours, or you believe that fathers like him deserve to be seen, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. It costs nothing, and it helps us continue sharing these stories every single day. These aren't just narratives. They're our lives, our struggles, our truths. This is our Black Diary, and you're part of it now. Now, let's return to that rainy night. The night everything changed. It was a Thursday, October 12th, the kind of night where rain didn't just fall from the sky, it attacked. Sheets of water transformed Highway 29 into a treacherous river, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Isaiah was driving home from his second job, a weekend security position he had taken to pay for Kennedy's school supplies and the lawyer he couldn't truly afford. His shift ended at 10 in the evening. He was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. This was the kind of exhaustion that lived in your bones, in your soul. The fatigue of a man holding his world together with sheer will. That's when he saw her. A figure stood beside a car on the shoulder of the highway. Hazard lights blinked rhythmically, like a desperate heartbeat crying out for help. Even through the rain and the darkness, Isaiah could see her arms wrapped around herself, body shaking. His first instinct was to keep driving. Not because Isaiah was cruel or indifferent, but because he had learned through painful experience what could happen when a black man stopped to help a white woman on an empty highway. Suspicion, accusations, police lights, the kind of misunderstanding that could destroy a life. But something made him slow down. Perhaps it was the relentless rain. Perhaps it was the way she stood there, alone and vulnerable. Perhaps it was the father in him that couldn't drive past someone's daughter in danger. He pulled over. As Isaiah stepped out of his truck, the rain immediately soaked through his jacket. The woman turned toward him. She was white, appeared to be in her mid-50s, and even drenched and distressed, she carried herself with a certain professional bearing. Her car, a silver Lexus, sat with its hood raised, steam rising into the cold night air like a dying breath. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Two strangers from two different worlds, brought together on one stormy highway. Isaiah called out to her, asking if she was okay. The woman hesitated. He saw it clearly, that flicker of doubt, that instinct society had programmed into her about men who looked like him. But then she nodded and explained that her car had died. Her phone battery was dead too. She had been stranded there for nearly an hour. Isaiah approached slowly, keeping his hands visible, keeping his voice calm and steady. These were movements he had practiced for years without consciously realizing it. Survival techniques for black men navigating a world that often viewed them as threats before seeing them as human. He examined the engine. The alternator belt had snapped clean through. He straightened up and delivered the news. She wouldn't be driving this car tonight. She needed a tow truck. The woman's face fell. She explained that she had no cell service in this area. She couldn't call anyone. Isaiah stood there in the pouring rain, water running down his face, and every logical part of his brain screamed at him to walk away. He had a custody hearing in 3 weeks. He had a daughter who needed him. This woman's problem was not his responsibility. But then Kennedy's voice echoed in his memory. Something she had said just the week before, quoting her teacher, "Daddy, Mrs. Chen says heroes are just people who help when they're scared." Isaiah exhaled slowly. He told the woman to get in his truck. He would drive her somewhere safe where she could call for help. Her name was Victoria. Victoria Hartwell, though she didn't share that information immediately. At that moment, all Isaiah knew was that she was cold, frightened, and stranded. They drove in silence for the first several miles, the heater blasting warm air, the rain continuing its assault on the windshield. Then Victoria spoke, her voice quiet but sincere. She thanked him. She told him that not many people would have stopped. Isaiah kept his eyes on the road and responded that someone would have stopped eventually. Victoria paused before replying that maybe someone would have, but he was the one who actually did. They began to talk. Small details at first, the weather, the road conditions. Then the conversation deepened. Victoria mentioned she had been returning from a conference about family law. She explained that she was a judge. Isaiah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. A judge. He didn't tell her about Kennedy. He didn't mention the custody battle. He didn't explain that in 3 weeks he would be standing in a courtroom, essentially begging the system to see him as more than a statistic, more than a stereotype. He simply drove. Isaiah brought Victoria to a 24-hour diner near exit 47. He waited with her until her colleague arrived to pick her up. Before she left, Victoria turned to him and asked for his name. He told her, Isaiah Bennett. She extended her hand, and he shook it. She thanked him again, telling him that he had probably saved her life that night. Isaiah shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. He was just doing what was right, he said. Victoria smiled, but there was something sad and knowing in that expression. She told him softly that not everyone did the right thing anymore. And then she was gone. Isaiah drove home through the continuing storm, crawled into bed at 2 in the morning, and never thought about that night again. until he walked into the courtroom 3 weeks later and saw Victoria Hartwell sitting behind the judge's bench. November 2nd. The custody hearing. Isaiah arrived at the courthouse at 8:15 in the morning, wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, too large in the shoulders, too short in the sleeves, but it was the best he could manage. His lawyer, Mr. Davison, was a public defender carrying too many cases and not enough hope. Outside the courtroom, Davison offered Isaiah a final piece of advice. Be honest, answer the questions, and don't get emotional. Don't get emotional. As if a father fighting for his child could be anything other than deeply, profoundly emotional. Inside, the courtroom was cold and sterile, the kind of space where lives were decided by people who had never actually lived those lives. Janelle sat on the opposite side with her attorney. She looked different than Isaiah remembered, put together, composed, as though she had spent 5 years becoming the person she should have been when Kennedy was born. Isaiah's stomach twisted with anxiety. Then the bailiff's voice rang out, instructing everyone to rise for the Honorable Judge Victoria Hartwell. Isaiah's heart stopped. Victoria Hartwell entered the courtroom in black robes, professional and composed, and when her eyes met Isaiah's across that space, there was a flicker, recognition, surprise. She remembered him. The hearing began. Janelle's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a reformed woman. She had a stable job now, a new apartment. She had completed therapy. She had built a support system. The lawyer argued that Janelle had worked tirelessly to rebuild her life and was now ready to be the mother Kennedy deserved. Then came the attacks on Isaiah. The lawyer pointed out that Isaiah worked long hours at 2 different jobs, that Kennedy was often with babysitters or in after-school programs. That Isaiah was doing his best, certainly, but was his best really enough for a young girl who needed consistent maternal presence? Isaiah's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. When it was his turn to testify, Davison asked him about his daily routine, his relationship with Kennedy, and the sacrifices he had made. Isaiah answered every question steadily and honestly. He acknowledged that he wasn't perfect, but he emphasized one undeniable truth. He had been there. Every single day, every fever, every nightmare, every parent-teacher conference. He had been present. Janelle's lawyer stood for cross-examination. The questions came quickly, designed to undermine. Wasn't it true that Isaiah had missed work multiple times this year? Isaiah confirmed that he had, but clarified that each absence was to care for Kennedy when she was sick. Wasn't it true that he worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet? Yes, Isaiah replied, to provide for his daughter. And wasn't it true that Kennedy had expressed interest in spending more time with her mother? That question landed like a physical blow. Isaiah's throat tightened. He responded quietly that Kennedy was 7 years old. She missed the idea of her mother. But he was the one who had actually been her parent. The lawyer sat down, looking satisfied. Judge Hartwell, Victoria, had remained silent throughout the proceedings, her face carefully unreadable. But Isaiah thought he saw something in her eyes, something that looked like internal conflict. I need to pause here for a moment. If you're feeling what Isaiah felt in that courtroom, that weight, that fear, that exhausting burden of having to prove your humanity, I want you to leave a comment and share your story. And if you believe Isaiah deserves justice, hit that like button. Let the algorithm understand that stories like this matter. Because when we engage, we fight back. Together. Now let's see what Judge Hartwell decided to do. After 4 hours of testimony, Judge Hartwell called a recess. She announced that she would deliver her decision the following morning at 9. Isaiah walked out of that courtroom feeling as though he were drowning. That night, sleep was impossible. He sat in Kennedy's room, watching her sleep peacefully, wondering if these might be among the last nights she would spend in this bed, in this home, with him. At 2 in the morning, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. A woman's voice came through the line. Professional. Familiar. It was Judge Hartwell. She told him she needed to speak with him. Off the record. They met at the same diner where Isaiah had brought her that rainy night. Victoria sat across from him without her robes, without her gavel, just a woman carrying the weight of impossible decisions. She told Isaiah that what she was doing was highly irregular, perhaps even improper, but she needed to say something. That night on the highway, when Isaiah stopped to help her, he didn't have to do that. Most people wouldn't have, but he did. Isaiah remained silent, uncertain where this conversation was leading. Victoria continued. She had been a family court judge for 18 years. She had seen thousands of cases. And in all that time, she had learned one painful truth. The system was designed to see black fathers as problems to be managed, not as parents to be supported. She told Isaiah that tomorrow she would make a decision, and it wouldn't be easy. Legally speaking, Janelle had done everything right. She had rebuilt her life. She was stable and ready. But Victoria's voice cracked slightly as she spoke. Isaiah had stopped in the rain for a complete stranger. He had given up his warmth and safety to help someone he didn't know. He had risked his own well-being for someone else's daughter. And that single act had revealed more about his character than any testimony ever could. Isaiah's eyes burned with unshed tears. He started to ask what she was saying, but Victoria gently interrupted. She told him that she was going to do something she rarely allowed herself to do. She was going to trust what she had witnessed personally, not just what appeared on paper. She made it clear that the situation wasn't completely resolved. Janelle had rights. She would receive visitation. Kennedy would spend time with her mother. But Isaiah, Victoria's voice softened as she said this, Isaiah would not lose his daughter. Isaiah couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The relief was overwhelming. Victoria stood to leave, but she offered one final thought. When Isaiah stopped that rainy night, he hadn't just saved her from the storm. He had reminded her why she had become a judge in the first place, to see people, not just cases. And then she left Isaiah sitting alone in that diner booth, processing what had just happened. The next morning, Isaiah stood before Judge Hartwell in a packed courtroom. Janelle and her lawyer sat on one side, Isaiah and Davison on the other. Victoria's voice was measured and professional as she delivered her decision. She acknowledged that this was a difficult case. Both parents clearly loved Kennedy. Both wanted what was best for her. However, she stated, custody was not about who wanted to be a parent. It was about who had been a parent. For 5 years, Isaiah Bennett had been the constant in Kennedy's life. He had sacrificed. He had persevered. He had shown up every single day. Janelle had made commendable progress, but progress was not the same as presence. Therefore, Victoria announced primary physical custody would remain with Isaiah Bennett. Isaiah's knees nearly buckled with relief. Victoria continued, clarifying that Janelle would have visitation rights, every other weekend and alternating holidays. Kennedy deserved to know both her parents. Janelle nodded, tears streaming down her face. Isaiah exhaled, 5 years of accumulated fear finally leaving his body. After the hearing concluded, Isaiah stood outside the courthouse. Kennedy was at school, safe and still his. Victoria walked past him, then paused. Isaiah thanked her for seeing him, for truly seeing him. Victoria smiled softly and replied that she should be thanking him for stopping in the rain. And with that brief exchange, she walked away. That afternoon, Isaiah picked Kennedy up from school. She ran to him with her backpack bouncing, her smile wide and untroubled. She asked him again about getting ice cream. Isaiah lifted her up and held her tightly. He told her yes, they could get ice cream. As they drove away, Kennedy noticed tears on his face. She asked why he was crying. Isaiah wiped his eyes and smiled. Happy tears, he told her, just happy tears. And for the first time in 5 years, Isaiah allowed himself to believe that they might actually be okay. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to fight for what you love, if you understand what it means to be truly seen when the world wants to look away, I want to ask 3 things of you. First, subscribe to this channel. It's free, and it keeps these stories alive. Second, hit that like button. Tell the algorithm that Black fathers' stories matter, that our dignity matters. Third, share this, because somewhere out there is another Isaiah, another Kennedy, another person who needs to know they're not alone. This is Our Black Diary, and you're part of this story now. Kindness is never wasted. Not when it's given in the rain, not when it's offered to strangers, not even when the world tells you to look away and protect yourself first. Isaiah stopped on a rain-soaked highway without knowing it would save his future. But perhaps that's exactly the point. We never know which moment of grace will echo back to us when we need it most. We never know which act of compassion will become the evidence that defines us. Isaiah chose humanity over self-preservation. He chose to help when it would have been easier, safer, more logical to drive away. And that choice, that single decision made in the darkness and the storm, became the testimony that mattered most. This is our Black Diary, where every story is a memory, and every memory is a mirror. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.